Perhaps the Calgary Flames are looking into a crystal ball tonight in Montreal.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. This is Locked On Flames, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. So visit FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL, and grab your Profit Boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Is Montreal a template for the Calgary Flames? We look at how the Canadiens organization has been built, and then we'll preview tonight's Calgary-Montreal matchup. And William Strömgren is getting pulled up from the AHL. We'll take a look at some farm notes for you. My name is Ryan G. I am a lifelong play-by-play broadcaster based in the Pacific Northwest and a decades-long Flames fan since Hall of Fame broadcaster Peter Marr narrated my perspective on the 2004 Stanley Cup final. And so excited to see how Calgary does on this road trip. A 5:30 p.m. Mountain Time start in Montreal. And this might be a glimpse into a prospective future, a possible future for the Calgary Flames. Kent Hughes, Montreal general manager, told reporters that the team's rebuild is ahead of schedule, according to the Calgary Flames official website. And when you look at the standings, it's kind of easy to agree that that is the plausible outcome of where this Canadiens reconstruction is going. Third in the Atlantic Division, 23-13-6 record, recently beat the Dallas Stars, which many, you look at the teams that are behind the Colorado Avalanche in the Western Conference standings, and arguably the Dallas Stars are the team that you suspect might be right on the heels of the Avalanche, even though right now, when it looks like the Avs are running away with the Western Conference, the idea of being on one's heels might still be, blocks behind in a pace. But Montreal's had a pretty good year, 52 points certainly, and with that overtime victory in Dallas, continues to gain ground in the standings in the Western Conference. But Montreal is paced by a pretty strong youth movement. I mean, they have a 26-year-old captain in Nick Suzuki, and this is somewhat the way that this team has been constructed. You have a first-round pick in Suzuki, a first-round pick in Lane Hutson, but both were mid-round picks. We're not talking people who are, in the top 4 picks of the draft per se. We'll get to someone who is exactly that in just a moment for Montreal. But your leading scorers are coming from the second round in Cole Caufield, and then you have, mid-first round picks with Suzuki and Lane Hutson. And so it's not necessarily, if your team tank and looking for a player in the top 3 picks of the NHL entry draft, it's not necessarily how this Montreal team has been constructed to be, quote, ahead of schedule in their rebuild. But at the same time, they've definitely had key pieces of their talent that come from that early part of the draft, namely the 2024 NHL entry draft. And for more on that, we get a quick glimpse into a little bit more Montreal Canadiens with Laura Saba of Locked On Canadiens.
Every time I watch him, I think to myself, I cannot believe the Montreal Canadiens have this guy on their roster. And I know, this year, he's in the, I know he got surpassed in his scoring at some point before I started recording this, but he's still in the top, I want to say top 2 or 3 in scoring for rookies. If I'm not mistaken, you can yell at me in the comments if I'm wrong on that, but he's just been so good. There's no way you can't give him anything less than, your A++, whatever. He's just the thing that I keep thinking about with Ivan Demidov is, you've already got your Nick Suzuki, Lane Hutson, Juraj Slafkovský, Cole Caufield. You've got now Noah Dobson. You've got a bunch of guys who are great, right? But in a couple of years' time, Ivan Demidov is going to be greater than all of them.
There you go. You're talking about a top 4 pick, Ivan Demidov, and this is the person that Laura couldn't quit talking about, right? And how excited they are for this kid who's turned 20 just a month ago and is up to 36 points through the first 42 games, 4th highest total on the team. So that's pretty impressive. And if you're in the camp of Team Tank for the Calgary Flames, this is a reason why. Is you get somebody who is a top 4 talent in an NHL draft year and can make a difference with just one calendar flip from the time that they were drafted. I mean, you're looking at 2024 entry draft, you go through the 2024-25 season, and all of a sudden things are getting better for your team sooner rather than later. And that's something that I think is on the wish list for Calgary Flames fans, because going in that 2024 draft, Montreal had the 5th best odds for the first pick, ended up picking 5th overall. I said 4th earlier, 5th overall. And that's where they got the Russian winger. And the results are paying dividends, certainly for Montreal because of that. But it's not just the early pick for Demidov. It's also some of what they've done with this reconstruction. We talked about how Edmonton got to the point where they were going through basically a 10-year period of suck to get to the point where they have Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, et cetera, et cetera. And so how has Montreal gotten to this point over the last 10 seasons? Well, they missed the playoffs 6 years, had 3 round 1 exits when they did make the playoffs. And the only other year was a Stanley Cup final year. Granted, that was during the pandemic season, right? And so you're looking at the worst seasons over that stretch, a 55-point mark in 2021-22, 68 points the following year. And then they had a couple of 70-point seasons in 17-18 and 19-20, and then the 23-24 season going into having the 5th pick in the entry draft. And you're not looking at a lot of guys who came out of that in the top 10 that are having huge contributions to Montreal. Cole Caufield is the only one kind of on the other side of those lower point seasons who's having a tremendous impact, except for one. And this is where I concern myself that I'm going to butcher some of the names, but Juraj Slafkovský was a 1st overall pick and is now 5th on the team in points. That was a 2022 pick. So if you're looking for the argument for Team Tank, I think you might have it in the way that the Canadiens still have these 2 talents in the last 3 draft years, or 4 going back to 2022, that are making a huge impact. I also, though, wonder if you have enough ammo in accumulating talent from the middle part of the opening round that it could make a big difference when everything is said and done for Calgary. So I don't think that that's the only way to go about it, is to be Team Tank and have the highest possible draft picks. But it makes me wonder too, that if you want to use the Canadiens as a possible comparison, when you have 2 guys who are so impactful right now that they're so excited about, who also happen to be top 5 picks, then in that case, I'd have to side with you. Who are some of the standout performers for the Canadiens going into the Calgary Flames game on the road, the first of 5 games and the first of back-to-back games with Boston coming up on Thursday? We'll also take a look at the last time these 2 teams met, as this is the second meeting between Montreal and Calgary. We'll do that next when this episode of Locked On Flames rolls on. The wild card round is here, and FanDuel is officially in playoff mode. Every game day during the NFL playoffs, FanDuel is giving customers even more ways to get into the action, because right now, every NFL playoff game day, FanDuel users get a profit boost pack waiting for them inside the app. Each game day, you'll see a pack loaded with multiple profit boosts you can apply to the bets you like most. Open your Profit Boost pack first thing on game day and see what boost you want to apply. The boost lets you lean into your game day instincts, whether you're backing momentum, defense, quarterback play, or coaching. The boost gives you more juice on the bets you already like instead of forcing you to bet on something new. Every play feels bigger, and the boosts make you bet in a way that feels bigger as well. You make your picks, then apply your Profit Boost to go after even bigger payouts while the playoffs get rolling. So visit FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL, and grab your Profit Boost pack every NFL playoff game day. Thank you for making Locked On Flames your first listen each day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. We continue to trek towards 700 subscribers on our Locked On Flames YouTube channel. So grateful for all of you who continue to comment. Let us know some things you might want to see or hear on the show coming up with the Olympic break, which is less than a month from now. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our Everydayer Club, access to ad-free audio feeds for Locked On Flames, compatible with all your favorite podcast apps, and an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server. Please check it out. Go to lockedonflames.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Last time Calgary and Montreal got together, it was a Flames overtime defeat. 1-for-3 Montreal on the power play. Calgary scored 0 on 5 chances in that matchup. Last 10 games, Canadiens are 6-2-2. And in terms of scoring a little bit better than Calgary over that stretch, 3.5 goals to about 3 goals so far. But the teams are fairly even over the last 10 games. And I think one thing that stood out too is just how good Calgary has been at home. But Montreal, not so much, just 10-9-1 in home games with a 23-13-6 record overall. It feels just a little bit out of whack over what you'd expect. Home games, 10-9-1, as I mentioned, for Montreal, whereas they're 13-4-5 away from Montreal, which is a little surprising because you don't feel like if you have a team that's third in the division that they'd be so mediocre at home compared to how they've been at home, but that is the case for this Montreal team. I mentioned Cole Caufield, 20 goals and 20 assists for the Canadiens, kind of the leader on this team, but also a 26-year-old captain in Nick Suzuki, who's 14 goals, 32 assists, and plus 14 in the plus minus this season. And then in that opening segment, we talked about some of the higher draft pick talent that Montreal has. Well, Slafkovský has 6 goals and 6 assists over the last 10 games. So again, paying dividends for some of those highest draft picks for Montreal, certainly a reality. And the youth movement kind of leans you toward that direction. And you wonder how Calgary can compete when they get the likes of Kolresny up into the NHL, maybe on that similar trajectory as Montreal has with Ivan Demidov. So Blake Coleman continues to shine, 13 goals, 8 assists for the Flames over the course of the season so far, and then 5 goals for Michael Backlund, although I feel like Michael's slowed down just a touch. The big trick, though, is how well can Calgary play on the road? 6-13-2 away from the Saddle Dome, and so it's definitely been a little bit of night and day for the Flames, home versus away, and it's a 5-game road stretch. I think the 2 finale losses in that homestand against Nashville and Seattle have kind of left a little bit of a bitter taste in the mouths of Flames fans, which kind of shifts the conversation back toward Team Tank, which is understandable. But right now, the difference between a playoff spot and a last place finish in the Western Conference is only 10 points between Winnipeg and San Jose. So let's say Calgary at 40 points, which is kind of in the middle of that pack, were to go 1-4 on this road trip, you're finding yourself closer to the bottom of the standings, depending on how things go with the Kings or the Sharks or the Ducks or the Kraken. I found it really interesting. You have Utah as the only positive points differential team that's not in the playoff picture, but also the fact that Vegas and Seattle are both in the top 3 in the Pacific Division, and they also have a negative points differential, a goal differential, excuse me. The teams in the Central are just crushing it. The Wild are in 3rd place and plus 21 compared to Seattle at -5, but in 3rd place in the Pacific Division. So right now, Calgary, if you're trying to make the playoffs, is kind of benefiting from the fact that the Pacific Division is a little bit of a trash can compared to the other teams. I also thought it was interesting, too, that Calgary at -14 in goal differential with 42 games played, which really isn't that far off from anyone in the playoff race. The Kings are 1 fewer game played so far, has that best goal differential other than Utah's +6. And so that shows you, I think, more how good Dustin Wolf, Devin Cooley have been as opposed to how good Calgary has been as a scoring team, because Calgary hasn't scored well this year. Mackenzie Weegar alluded to the fact that the Flames have struggled, not only on the road, but more so talking about hitting that plateau after reaching 500, saying, I think the last 2 games were a little sour for us. When we get back to 500, I don't know if we all took a deep breath and got complacent, especially when you get back to 500. You want to take the next step as a group. You want to get those 2 games and go on the road feeling good. We got to talk about tanking. We've got to talk about taking the next step as a group, because it was right there for us. Now we got a big road trip. We got to battle back to 500, and when we get there, we have to find that next gear. So Calgary's not too far off from being a 500 team at 18-20-4, but it's a lot of games in a short amount of time when you're looking at basically a week for Calgary on the road between tonight's game in Montreal and next Thursday at Chicago, rounding things out. And I think that first stretch of this, tonight against Montreal, on Thursday against Boston, and then to Pittsburgh on Saturday, and that's an even earlier start time, it really feels like a condensed road trip for Calgary more than a full 5-game road swing. Devin Cooley is expected to make the trip. He missed the game on Monday against Seattle because of illness. I mentioned on Tuesday's episode of Locked On Flames, which I encourage you to listen to, is the workload on Dustin Wolf right now been a little bit too heavy. 6 straight starts for Wolf, and the last 2, the game against Nashville and the loss against Seattle, both were some of his worst games in that, all things considered, especially because he hadn't given up 3+ goals in back-to-back games since mid-November. So it'd be nice to see Wolfie get a little bit of a break over the course of this road trip as well. I had one other note that caught my eye from the official Calgary Flames website, and it was the fact that a total of 9 skaters scored for the Flames over the course of their 5-game homestand. So there was scoring kind of spread throughout the Flames games at home following the trip up to Edmonton for the first of those Battle of Alberta games. That's really cool. It's neat that they're getting goals from a variety of places, perhaps, but at the end of the day, it's not as good as having the amount of scoring that you're going to need. Calgary right now has scored, an average of 2 goals in the last 2 games, and Seattle really put it on Calgary over the course of the last 2 periods. You only have that 1 goal scored by Adam Klapka in the opening period, and from there, it was just kind of a drought. Not much fun. And so all of that to say, there's a little bit of work to do for Calgary. Maybe they have to slow down the likes of Cole Caufield. I mentioned the 20 goals, 20 assists for the Canadiens. And Laura Saba of Locked On Canadiens was really excited about the trajectory of another youthful player for Montreal.
He's put up 20 goals, and all we've done this season is talk about other people. We talk about Nick Suzuki, we talk about Lane Hudson, we talk about Juraj Slafkovský, but he has put up 20 goals. He's got 40 points, right? I think he's going to pass that. And I think, we talk a lot about the Olympic snub. I talked about it a couple of days ago, actually. And Cole Caufield, I think, I don't know if he's going to take this as like a reason, like a fire to be lit under his butt. I think that he cares more about just hitting those milestones for himself. Like, I think he really strongly wants to be a 40-goal scorer and even a 50-goal scorer one day.
And it's certainly possible with the way that started for Caufield. But again, those younger players from Montreal have kind of gotten the Canadiens ahead of schedule, according to their GM. And we'll see what happens. It'd be a big win for Calgary if you're trying to go 3-2 on the road trip, especially if you want to try to get to 4-1. It always helps when you win that first game. If you don't, I could definitely see a team that comes back to Calgary with a 1-4, 2-3 result from the road. There will be a new face NHL debut on the way for the Calgary Flames when they take on the Canadiens in Montreal on Wednesday. We'll talk a little bit about the farm notes that are out there when this episode of Locked on Flames continues. Calgary looks to get its first win over Montreal after falling 2-1 in the first meeting between the teams, 5:30 Pacific time in Montreal. Calgary has called up William Strömgren red hot over the past couple of weeks. 4 goals, 9 points in the past 5 outings for the Wranglers of the AHL, and now 23 assists. So he's been absolutely stellar for the farm club. Ryan Huska very excited about bringing up his young forward and getting an opportunity to see how Calgary can add him into the mix and try to, again, start getting a little bit more out of this youth that is in Calgary's system. Huska saying it's always been who is playing the best down there. Yes, we look at positions and who fits in what hole and all that, but I think you have to keep trying to reward players, and William has been a really good player for them. So this was the time where we felt it was right to bring him up. And so excited about that for Calgary. And I looked at some of the other players that were around the 40th draft pick in the 2021 draft. You had the 45th pick for Strömgren, and the only one that's really playing any meaningful NHL minutes, kind of +2, -2 on the other side of the draft pick for Calgary, is Logan Stankoven, who Stankoven, perhaps 47th overall to the Stars, ended up being traded to Carolina and has 28 goals in the first 145 NHL games of his career. The rest of the folks who were drafted around Strömgren definitely are not putting up anything really meaningful in the NHL. Haven't even, I think, logged any NHL minutes yet. So might be a positive for Calgary to see William get into the mix coming up in the game against Montreal today. Colin Potter, speaking of the farm system, down at Arizona State, 12 goals, 13 assists, 25 points in 22 games so far, and had a hat trick the other day as the Sun Devils beat Alaska Anchorage and then followed that up with a goal against Air Force the next day. So they competed in the Desert Hockey Classic. And so I was just kind of looking at the farm report from the Calgary Flames website, and that was somebody who kind of stood out to me as worth mentioning on the show, just because when you're starting to contemplate how things are going for the Flames and looking at what youth talent exists in addition to daydreaming for McKenna and any other possible, early round pick, I think it's important to kind of look at too what Calgary already has in the hopper, if you will. And then Cole Reshnioff, strong performance at World Juniors, and then certainly Zane Parekh, who will be back with the team in this 5-game road trip, leading Team Canada, the most points by a defenseman in World Juniors history. There's a lot of positives to take away from where Calgary is with some of their existing youth players, while also wondering what could be ahead for Calgary if they were to get a top 5 draft pick, depending on how this season finishes out. And that's the last thing I'll add about that piece is, Ivan Demidov being a top 5 pick in the 2024 draft when Montreal was basically slotted to pick 5th. It wasn't any semblance of lottery luck or whatever the case may be. Perhaps Calgary might even get something like that if they were to be a 7.5% or a 6.5% to finish, 6th or 7th in the Western Conference, or toward the bottom of the Western Conference. Maybe that would be enough for Calgary to get a little bit of lottery luck and move up. But at the same time, talent's to be had there, even if you're in the top 6, top 7. And the way that the NHL standings are condensed right now, everything's very compacted outside of the Central Division in the Western Conference, the central top 3 in the Western Conference. There might be something like that ahead for Calgary. So the first game of a 5-game road trip tonight, 5:30 Mountain Time from Montreal. We appreciate you tuning into this episode of Locked on Flames. We'll recap the Montreal-Calgary game on Thursday's edition of the show. Also look ahead to Boston-Calgary, those two teams meeting for the second time in just a span of a few weeks. So we invite you to subscribe and follow Locked on Flames so you can get all of the latest episodes. And if you ever miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked on Flames ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonflames.supercast.com to join the club. And for those of you on video, we send you over to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure your second listen is NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL. My name is Ryan G. Thanks for having fun with us. We'll talk to you again on Thursday for more Locked On Flames.